Two police officers were driving down the road on a quiet summer night when they spotted something strange. There was a car stopped at the side of the road, but it was in a position that a car shouldn't stop in since it was out in the middle of the road. Two of the police officers walked around to the car to investigate, and they nearly got sick when they realized what they saw. They had seen a woman lying lifeless inside the car with towels stuffed into her body and most of her organs removed. One of the police officers turned around and got sick, but the other was more experienced and was used to seeing sick things, so he just took out his notebook and started writing down notes. Then he rang back to the station to call in the crime scene. The police officers wondered what type of sick person could do that to anyone. They wondered, was it some dark ritual or even a sacrifice taking the baby out of the body, because there were really strange stories around the town for years and years of witchcraft rituals in the woods, and this road was by the woods. When they went back to investigate more looking into the car, they felt a strange presence, and when they looked back into the back seat, they froze in fear of what they saw. They turned around and saw a baby stare at them, and not cry or whimper, but they still knew the baby was alive. They couldn't comprehend how the baby got into the car, and also wondered how the baby could have survived being taken out of the mother's body. The two officers seemed to be in a daze. When they took the baby out of the car, one of the officers realized there was a newspaper article stuck in the baby's hand. It was as if the baby was clutching onto it for dear life. The newspaper article was about a serial killer that died in prison 2 days ago, and before his death he became obsessed with being reborn through a human sacrifice. It sounded sick, so he didn't read on. One of the officers had a crazy idea he didn't tell anyone, but since he had the opportunity he went ahead with it, and knew people in the right places, so he got someone to run a DNA test on the baby. A shiver ran up his spine when he realized a hit came up on file, which was the same match as the murderer who wrote the notes about being reborn through a human sacrifice. My wife and I bought a house that was quite cheap for the area, and that was 2 years ago. We have 2 daughters together. At first, everything was fine, and nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Then one day we would find every chair, pot, jar and other household objects all divided into 2 corners. One corner of the household objects had a red mark on them, while the other half of household objects had a blue mark. We tried putting things back to where they were supposed to go, but everything ended up being divided into their corners again. Then one day I awoke with a blue mark on my arm, and same with my oldest daughter. We both found ourselves with the other household objects that also had a blue mark on them. My wife and my youngest daughter had a red mark on them, and they awoke alongside the household objects that had a red mark on them as well. We then brought in a psychic, and she told us that the spirits from the married couple who used to live in this house are now finally divorcing in the afterlife. They have split up everything 50-50 and marked them red and blue. Red is for the deceased husband, and the blue is for the deceased wife. My wife and I looked at each other, as we both knew we would be taken away. We knew we had to get out of this house or sell it as quick as possible. Then one day, some of the household objects that were divided into red and blue had disappeared. Our daughters were part of the disappearance. The two spirits are slowly taking their 50-50 divorce splits. Me and my wife are just waiting for us to get taken now. Hello, my name is Brian. Some people have a genuine phobia against clowns. They are genuinely petrified of them. I don't have that phobia. I have something much worse. I have a good reason to fear clowns, and Ferris wheels, and carnivals. The reason will become very clear as I go on and tell you my story, and tell you exactly what happened to me and two of my friends. After this story, you will see why I never ever visit the carnival when it visits my town. It was a few years ago me and my friends visited the local carnival, and at the time we had so much fun. You see, it wasn't what happened to us in the carnival freaked us out, no way. It was what happened afterwards. We were eating popcorn, we went on the Ferris wheel, and laughed so much at the silly clown who was extra funny. But that night when I got home, I was tired and went straight to bed. I must have fell asleep fast because I had such a bad nightmare that the clown in the carnival was holding a knife up to me and was about to kill me. There was all weird stuff happening in the nightmare. The next day in school, I was telling my friends about the nightmare, and they surprised me and shocked me by explaining to me in detail the same dream. But instead of what happened to me in the dream, it happened to them when they had their dream. Exactly the same, besides them being killed instead of me. Things don't end there though. The weirdest part about it is that no one in my town remembered any carnival coming this year. They said the last time the carnival came was last year. Me and my friends didn't have a clue what was happening because the three of us knew we were all at the carnival just 2 nights ago, and that night we all had the same dream. When the summer came, there was a poster for the carnival out, and to my surprise there was a photo of the exact same clown that tried to kill me in my dream. And before the dream, I have never ever laid my eyes on the clown. I froze in fear, knowing that it was exactly the same clown that was in my dream, and wondered how the hell this was happening. It's not as if I had a memory of a clown like him before. Me and my friends stayed away from the carnival for the whole 5 nights they were there. The day after the carnival left, there was pandemonium around my town, as there were 2 kids missing. People were putting up posters, and when I looked at the posters, I saw 2 of my friends' faces. I felt content knowing I had stabbed and killed both of them, but I didn't know why. They were my friends. But then I heard a voice inside my head telling me, "You have passed this incredible plan of mine. I conducted from the other side. I was a killer in your town years and years ago, so many years that folk today would have forgotten about me. Yes, but I hate that they forgot about me. But thanks to me having the power to get into your dreams and harness the energy, even when you're awake, yes, daydreaming. And your daydreams became a reality. That has made me a very happy clown. I looked in the mirror and snapped out of my daydream, and when I looked in the mirror, I was dressed as a clown and was just after stabbing myself in the neck. Jack was a criminal into all sorts of criminal activity. He was in court for so many different crimes. He spent 10 years in prison, but since he was released, he didn't get reformed. He just got better at not being caught for whatever crimes he committed. During his last court appearance, the judge had told him that if he keeps getting arrested, he will be put into prison for good. One night, Jack was trying to rob a bank, but then it went horribly wrong, and he ended up shooting a police officer. He knew it was the death penalty for capital punishment. While he was waiting on death row, there were several groups against the death penalty and wanting to ban it outright. He sat in prison writing and writing about his feelings, trying to pass the time. He had no access to the internet or newspapers, but still found out about the groups that were pushing for the death penalty to be banned. It was a prison warden on death row told him the first day it was finalized, he would not be getting the death penalty. He would not be sentenced to death. He was relieved, but then felt even sicker, knowing he would be locked up in a prison for years and years until he finally died. He wondered how he would stay sane. To his surprise, one day, a man in a suit opened his cell and said to him, "Hello, Jack. My name is Terry. I am the head of New Beginnings. I am the leader of the group that has successfully banned the death penalty. You are the first person we are trying the alternate punishment out on. You just need to go through a quick operation and then you are free to go out into the outside world." Jack couldn't believe his ears and knew there must have been a catch. The next day he was lying in a room with doctors all around him, and when he woke up, the doctor said, "Hi Jack, your procedure is done and you are free to go." Jack asked what was the catch, and they told him, "You will see, but don't worry Jack, you won't be hurt and you won't ever get locked up again." When Jack left the room, none of the officers acknowledged him or said goodbye or good luck. When he was walking down the street, no one acknowledged him. It wasn't until he tried to make a phone call from when he was home he found something strange. No matter what number he rang or text he tried writing, nothing happened. He knocked at his friend's door. There was no answer. Suddenly his friend's car pulled up in his driveway, and Jack said, "They set me free," but his friend didn't seem to hear him. He didn't see him. And then he knew the new punishment for him not getting the death penalty was being immortal, invisible, and alone, with no chance of lifting an object to let anyone know he was there. He knew he was immortal because there was a voice inside his head told him. But that voice told him that now that he knows he will be alone, it also told him no matter what he lifts, he will think he lifted it. He will think he opened doors. He will think he threw glasses if that's what he done. But to anyone else, there will be no one or nothing there. Jack would be invisible, alone, and immortal. The story begins in the year 1899, when a monstrosity of a lighthouse was built in an island off Ireland. The weather and storms surrounding the area were lethal, and some say at the worst of times there would be waves 100 feet high. This lighthouse had to have people working there, but it was taken into account when building the lighthouse that if they did have one person living there, they would be so lonely and it would affect them so much being isolated, it would drive them mad. But if there were two, then them being together out in the middle of nowhere, it could drive them to kill each other. So that is what made it clear there would be 3 people working in the lighthouse. It went according to plan until 1900, when a photographer and his assistant and a very skilled sailor sailed out to the island, so the photographer could take photos of the lighthouse keepers and the lighthouse and island. It was then that everything got very strange, as they turned every stone in the island, looking all over for the 3 men, but couldn't find a trace of them. It was like they disappeared into thin air. It was not like them to have been swept away by being outside, as they usually always would go inside and bolt the door and stay in when it became evening, as they knew how dangerous the weather could get. The photographer was thinking of writing a story about the strange disappearance when suddenly he realized there was a crumpled up piece of paper in the room that he hadn't noticed before. He opened the paper and it had written on it, "I will help you solve the mystery of the lighthouse keepers and their fate. Wait outside the lighthouse at 4 p.m. The photographer was standing outside the lighthouse, hoping it was the right part, as it was so big. He was really anxious to find out who wrote the note and what they would say. There was no one on the island when they went looking, and they looked everywhere. Plus the island wasn't that big. Suddenly it got very stormy, and he could see a huge wall of water coming straight for him. It was then he realized that he wasn't only going to learn how the men died, but die exactly the same way. Just before the wave hit him, he saw the 3 ghosts of the men right in front of him. Sam was on social media for a few years now, but didn't get half of the views he would have liked. He decided to hatch a plan to gain loads of followers and viewers. His plan consisted of him driving a taxi that he usually does, but something different for a live stream. He rigged the taxi with lots of cameras to film his customers. He had something very different planned for them. That difference was that he would have a needle in the back seat full of poison, and each customer who gets in would be killed from the poison going into their back. The needle tips were spread all over the back, so no matter where they would sit, they would get jabbed. He murdered about 10 people when his live stream went up to about 100,000 views. The local sheriff of Sam's town got tipped off after the 5th person was killed, so he was tracking the car by people giving tips of what was in the background of the live stream, giving away where it was originating from. even though Sam was constantly on the move apart from stopping for customers. The viewers helping the police eventually knew Sam seemed to be driving to his house. A while later there was a SWAT team outside Sam's house, and they knew from the live stream he was in the garage. He could see he was holding a gun up to people, and the SWAT team broke the garage door down and shouted, "Stop!" Sam jumped with fright, and one of the police officers' guns went off and shot Sam between the eyes. Then 10 of his victims came out shouting and screaming. The detective was relieved the poison in the needle didn't kill them, but must have just put them to sleep. Then things got worse than he could ever have imagined. When one of the people said, "Oh my God, why did you shoot Sam? We are all actors. This has all been a stunt. None of us were killed. Those needles were just rubber. They weren't real needles. We were just helping Sam stage a fake, crazy live stream of him killing people." The sheriff checked Sam's pulse. He was dead, and they realized he was guilty of staging a fake mass murder spree. This is more of a vent post than a story. I have an unusual condition where I randomly age to any number. Some days I might be an old man, and other days I might be a baby. My parents did their best to give me the best life they could offer. I couldn't go to school all of the time because I would wake up completely old at the height of 6'2", while the night before I was just a crying baby. There are times I would wake up at the right healthy ages, from 15 to 45, and that's just my opinion. My dad would promise me to take me somewhere fun as I was a child. Then the next day I would age up to an old man again, and all I wanted to do was watch the news. I wish I could just age in order like everyone else. I don't care if it was young to old or old to young, because random aging is just terrible. At the moment you could be at the prime age of being in your 20s, while the next day you could end up as a crying baby again. People found me as a crying baby on the street, and also as an old homeless man on the bench who was nearing to death. I just want to be normal. Many different types of people like me at different ages. Mothers or women who want to become pregnant like me as a baby, while old folk like me when I am old, and the present generation like me in the prime ages of being in my 20s, 30s and 40s. I was once kidnapped as a baby, and then the kidnapper let me go a day later, as I ended up aging to a man in my 30s. A day later I found myself in an old people's home, as I had randomly aged to an old man in my 90s. Then a day later I walked out of the old people's home as a rebellious teenager. I just want to age normally, in order where I could plan things. It's impossible to plan anything in my condition, as in one moment I could be an old man, and the next day I could go back to being a baby. There is nothing out there. If this is depressing, then I am sorry.